Who can take a flower, roll it up and make it fine, sprinkle it with knowledge and a little bit of time, cover it with headlines and a sweet euphoria too. Cannabis man, cannabis man, cannabis man, spreading news and joy across the land, diving deep into the growing green. Cannabis man, they're all king. Ooh yeah, ooh yeah.
Hello, and welcome into another episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Thanks so much for clicking on the show and checking it out. I'm your host, Don Kleppen, and I created the show a few years ago to take a more in-depth look at legal cannabis. This is a space that's changing all the time, and I'm a personal cannabis user of getting uncomfortably close to 20 years, which it just feels long to say for me. And I'm also a broadcaster in Chicago. I've done news on the radio for the past decade or so. I've been on a few different stations. Currently, you can hear me on 720 AM WGN. I'm on Saturday mornings with House Smarts, Lou Manfredini, and Home Sweet Home Chicago with David Hochberg. And I also fill in during the week doing traffic or business or other such. So you can kind of hear me on the radio there if radio is your thing. But either way, when I was spending time in that newsroom, along with the others I've worked in Chicago here, and just sort of looking as states legalized cannabis around the U.S. starting in 2014 with Colorado and Washington, all the way up to right now, a decade later. I'm recording this December 6th of 2024. And the conversations that I had with other stoners, connoisseurs, if you like, people who partake in the plant at parties and whenever I've met them over the years, the conversations we had about cannabis in terms of the quality of life issues that it could help with. I'm somebody that turned to it for its help getting me to sleep at night. There's also stuff like chronic back pain or other injuries that, you might still suffer some issues from. There's all kinds of other medical complaints that it can help with or that people have reported it helping with. It's also a great alternative to getting you off of other addictions. I've talked about that on the show with various guests. Cannabis truly is a great alternative, and I got into a discussion about that on Twitter this week, and I'll kind of break that down for you after we open this up. But my point is, I started this show because I wanted to spread those conversations about cannabis and what it could offer people that I didn't hear materializing in the mainstream media, the legacy media, radio, TV, all of those stations that we kind of turn to still, I think, for perspective, for new information. Those stations are still very hesitant to cover cannabis positively. I see still, to this day, a lot more familiarity and comfort with sharing stereotypes, Cheech and Chong punchlines, stuff that is really reminiscent of last century's propaganda, the same old reefer madness, dare education videos. That stuff is really baked into our collective consciousness, no pun intended, but that is really hard to shake, and that stigma is what I am trying in my small way to fight here on the Cannabis Man podcast. So in that regard, I like to talk with experts in the space. If those are doctors or researchers, like I just referenced before, I like to bring those conversations to you, politicians who are either elected or appointed to create cannabis laws and run the departments in states that have legalized and countries as well that'll create the foundation for legal cannabis moving forward. Also entrepreneurs, business owners, creators of products or services that we all get to try in the cannabis space, and there is so much excitement in that vein. So I love bringing those conversations to you, and I have one such conversation in that vein today. I'm speaking with the CEO of a company who is making some really exciting skincare products. Now, this is an element of cannabis that I haven't really brought up too much on the show. I talk a lot about flower. I talk a lot about consumables like beverages or edibles. Very exciting stuff in that space too. But cannabis can also be extremely helpful, as I said, in terms of chronic body pain or irritation. There are things that it can help with. And so putting it into like a skin cream is something that people are starting to do. And I've got a product as well as a guest interview to talk with you about in that vein today. I also like to share with you the latest news stories regarding cannabis, things I think you should know about, share a little bit of my perspective on those headlines, and just kind of lay out for you some information that I think you need to know, the latest in the cannabis space. I also do product reviews. I've got a couple of those to tell you about today. The news joint wrap is really Illinois focused. I'm here in Chicago, so my day-to-day life is definitely impacted by what goes on in and around Illinois. So the news joint wrap is kind of some local stories regarding cannabis stuff. And if you stick around to the very end, you will also hear the haiku, which is something that I debuted a couple episodes ago. Just a fun little way to wrap up the show after getting through all the latest news and some of the oftentimes bit downer stories that I sometimes tell on here regarding cannabis. Some of them are very exciting, but a lot of them are sort of eye rollers, or they might make you, not happy to hear. So I thought it'd be fun to end the shows with something a little more lighthearted, and so I craft a haiku in the theme of the show, which is to say, stoner written. I write these while I am in an elevated state of mind, and I like them to tie in with some theme of the episode that precedes them, so stick around and you'll hear that later. If you haven't already, and if you would be so kind, please leave a rating or a review for this show. If you're listening on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Downcast, Overcast, whichever platform you get your podcasts on, there is some way to not only subscribe to the show, but leave some kind of ratings. If it's 3 stars, 4 or 5, whatever you think that this content is worth for you, I would really appreciate any ratings or reviews that you can leave. And be sure to share it with anybody you know who's into cannabis, who might also like to be up to date on the latest news stories or new products that they're looking to try. Tell them about the Cannabis Man podcast. And you can also tell them about the weekly Chronic newsletter, which I launched back in October. It is kind of a companion piece now to this podcast. It comes out every Tuesday, new issues go right to your email inbox, or if you're on Substack, you can get it there. But on that newsletter, I talk about news stories that don't make it onto these podcasts. I give you a little behind-the-scenes glimpse into me putting together these episodes. I also review other products, and I tell some jokes, and I review some other things, and I will go through this week's Weekly Chronic after we open the show up properly here. But if you're interested, you can subscribe to that down below in the description notes. So without further ado, let's get into this episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Hit it.
This is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to the Cannabis broadcast.
Oh, yeah. Now the show's open, and I hope we're all feeling great. I know it's kind of tough. I'm not sure where you are, listener, but in Chicago here, winter, even though it's not officially meteorological winter because the solstice has not hit yet, it has been feeling very much like winter. Temperatures dropping into the teens, 20s. That's kind of been where we've been hanging out these last few weeks. And this weekend, it's going to be up in the 40s, and the fact that people are celebrating that really tells you where our standards are here in the Chicago area as winter approaches. It is brutal, but I hope it's not that bad by you. If you're like me, if you are in this upper Midwest of the U.S. or anywhere else in the world, winter is coming, and it's a great time to find some cannabis products that you can enjoy indoors. Flower's great. It's definitely my number one. I always talk about on the show how much I love smoking it. That was the gateway that sort of led me into this, stoner paradise that some of us in legal states are living in now anyway. But as cannabis does become more legalized, more normalized, and as more of these entrepreneurs are creating products and services, there are a lot of other ways to consume it. And specifically, I think of the beverage space, which is just exploding, whether they're proper THC beverages or hemp hemp-based beverages, there's THC in it either way, but what I mean to say is if these beverages are sold at dispensaries or some of them which are hemp-based and so therefore have a smaller amount of THC in them, you can find some of these at liquor stores. You can find them at, grocery stores, at your local market. Around here in Chicago, I've been seeing more and more of these pop up. It is a very exciting time that way. And I also find that maybe some of your family members who never were interested or would have given cannabis the time of day never would ever take a puff. If you bring some beverages to these family get-togethers around the holidays, you might be surprised as to who's willing to take a swig from one of those cans or bottles, because for some reason, people are a lot more comfortable, especially now that it is moving toward legalization. People are a lot more comfortable taking a sip from a can versus, taking a hit from a joint. I do get it on some level. Smoking, I think, especially if you're not like a cigarette smoker, smoking is just not a healthy habit. So I think people have less of a hang up about that. But also beverages are so baked into our social interactions. I talk with guests about this all the time, including last week, my guest, Sierra Elena, who was talking about Lahua brands and her beverages. We talked about how much beverages and sharing drinks with people means socially. And that's where alcohol has really kind of had this, chokehold on our society for so long. It's exciting to see these cannabis beverages take their places. But either way, whatever indoor-friendly consumable cannabis products you can find, those are great for winter time, and it's time to stock up. Hibernation season is upon us, and the more you can sort of stay indoors or, not expose yourself to that brutal wind out there and still consume the cannabis, that's the best stuff. I've seen a lot of people complaining about when it is cold, it's not pleasant necessarily to go outside and then smoke because your lungs hurt inhaling that cold air. You cough a lot more than maybe you would normally inhaling from a joint or a blunt or whatever you do. So just think about that as winter approaches and stuff like that. But I mentioned at the top about how cannabis is also this great alternative, that it can help you with maybe other addictions, other substances that you're struggling to kick. And I got into a conversation on Twitter, and I've been on Blue Sky as well. You can follow the show there at C-Man Podcast on both platforms, by the way. But I was on there this week talking with people about the notion of cannabis helping with addiction. And I shared something that I don't necessarily remember sharing on this show, so I figured I would bring it here, and I wanted to hear your thoughts about this. But over the years, cannabis has helped me quit some substances that I didn't really want as a part of my life anymore. And I'm talking specifically about cigarettes and cocaine, both stimulants, which are not really my jam. And thankfully, as I mentioned in these conversations, I was not really hooked on either substance for a very long time in these cases. So it's not as if it was like a years-long battle I was fighting. I smoked cigarettes for about a year in my early 20s. It was never something that I was super into as a kid. Both my parents smoked, and I always thought I'd stay away from it. But I was working at a retailer in my early 20s, and all my colleagues smoked. And after a few weeks there, I understood why. It's because we got extra breaks throughout our shifts. If you smoked once an hour, you could step outside for 10 minutes if you were a smoker. But if not, you kind of had to settle for your, 15 minutes every 4 hours and your lunch break for the 8-hour shifts. So once that hit, I was like, okay, I'll go outside and I'll smoke some cigarettes for extra breaks. But then, of course, after a couple of months of that, you're, even less time, you're hooked on it. And then with cocaine, for me, it was like a summer in my later 20s when I was, living with roommates in the city, and, a lot of them were in the restaurant industry. A lot of them worked in the back of the house, and anybody who's ever worked in the back of the house of a restaurant or knows people who do, it is very much a party atmosphere. And so a lot of people were always coming around to our apartments, and a lot of them had cocaine as well. And so that was a time where, for that summer mainly, we're talking about maybe 4-5 months total at the most, I was doing cocaine more regularly. And the reason I bring these things up is because I haven't done either one of those in years. I'm now, 37. It's been probably close to a decade since I've done any cocaine, and it's been longer than that since I've smoked a cigarette. And my point in bringing these up on this show is that cannabis was not just instrumental in helping me step off of both those substances, but it was essential. If I didn't have cannabis, I might very well still be using one or both of those today. Anybody, if you've ever used one or if you know people who do, they'll tell you those are very addictive. And as I said, even though stimulants weren't really my thing, even though I was somebody that never really thought that I would smoke cigarettes, I made sure never to try it in high school, mostly in college too. So I was somebody that was pretty sure I was safe from those. And yet, when I just opened the door a crack, there I was a year later kind of trying to quit. And, like I said, just by using cannabis, not even necessarily on a daily basis, but just every few days, whenever I really, really was hankering for either one of those, by utilizing cannabis, I was able to feel better in my current state, and my cravings for those substances subsided slowly. It did take a while, certainly a couple of months, I would say, to be fully free of those cravings. But I'm happy to tell anybody how potent cannabis was in that process for me. And as I've talked about on this show with guests like Dr. Ari Grice of the Rothman Orthopedic Institute, I interviewed him during my first year of doing this show, and he said right then that cannabis is truly the only alternative for people addicted to opioids, specifically medically prescribed ones. Not necessarily heroin we're talking here, but we're talking about morphine. We're talking about Norcos. We're talking about Vicodin. Anybody who's ever been on those, anyone who's ever been prescribed them, they may not even be your thing, but the way they make you feel, those are very hard to quit too. And Dr. Grice said that cannabis really is the only viable alternative to those, not just because they can help replace the substance that alleviates your unpleasant symptoms, but also because, as I just laid out, cannabis can be really, really helpful in offering you an off-ramp from other substances or even behaviors to which you might be addicted. And of course, I talk on the show about cannabis addiction as well, but that's a whole nother conversation, and I won't jump into that right now. What I will jump into is wishing a very happy birthday to my lovely wife, Gretchen. She had a birthday on Thursday of this week, yesterday from when I'm recording this, December 5th, and we had a wonderful dinner. We got to enjoy a lovely evening with Violet. Even with the winter, there's some lovely holiday things that go on around Chicago. We've got a nice weekend full of stuff planned here. We're going to a Blackhawks game with my family, my mom, my stepdad, my siblings. All of us are going to be at the Hawks game tomorrow, and then we're going to a friend of Gretchen's daughter. Her birthday party is being held on Sunday. Amelia is turning 3 years old, so we'll be bringing Violet there, and that's going to be a lot of fun. But I just wanted to wish a very happy birthday to Gretchen again, because she makes my life a lot more worth living, and certainly a lot brighter. Her and Violet both do. And it's a lovely thing, this thing we call life, and it's much lovelier with her as my partner in it. So happy birthday, baby. Thank you very much for putting up with me and being my partner as we move through this together. By the way, on that topic of addiction, whether talking about cigarettes or coke or any of these substances that I was just talking about, cannabis included, if you have anything to say about this, or maybe you disagree with a stance that I've taken on this or any other issues that you hear me talk about in the show, text me. There is a link down below. You can hit the text Cannabis Man link and send a message, and I will get it and address it. And finally, before I jump into the News Joint wrap, I want to tell you what was in this week's Weekly Chronic, the most recent issue, which came out on Tuesday. The news stories that I broke down include Trump's DEA pick signaling support for decriminalization of cannabis in Florida. That already is null and void because of a story that I'll get to later, but basically that DEA pick is already withdrawing from contention, a lot like Matt Gaetz did. So this cabinet is sort of struggling to be filled. But also a record of cannabis sales was hit in October, $2.8 billion with a B dollars in the U.S. of cannabis sales just in the month of October. Also something I really wanted to tell you here, there was a study, and you should really check this out if you haven't heard of it already. These details are fascinating. But there was a study on teen cannabis use. And what this study found, they were looking into the theories, which a lot of which you may have already heard of recently. A popular one that we see popping up a lot is that teens self-medicate with cannabis, is that teens using cannabis may exhibit symptoms of psychosis. And so this study was conducted on nearly 12,000 participants starting at age 9.5, and this was published in JAMA Psychiatry. And they found that actually the self-medication with cannabis may come after the psychosis symptoms already have started to show. So rather than this reefer madness fear-mongering line that we've really heard of, and again, we do need more studies to confirm this, but they went in looking at the contributing risk hypothesis, which is the one that says cannabis precedes psychosis symptoms. And what they found is that in actuality, it's a lot more likely that the psychosis symptoms precede the cannabis use, that teens may be turning to cannabis to self-medicate for those psychosis symptoms. So I dove into that a little deeply in this issue of the Weekly Chronic, and then I also broke down Thailand's, the cannabis industry, the uncertainty, and how it's been tied up in their politics there. That has been very interesting. And finally, I also get deep into the fall of Jay-Z's cannabis brand, Monogram. You may remember this, listener, back in 2020. I certainly do. Jay-Z came out with a lot of money, and there was a lot of promoting of these luxury cannabis products. And now, today, in 2024, you cannot even find Monogram cannabis products on California store shelves. The company is in what's been described as a death spiral. $575 million, which they entered the market with 4 years ago, is apparently all gone. And what I sort of broke down in the Weekly Chronic, and my ultimate stance on this is that, you know, these celebrities that come in here and sort of spin this high luxury, idea of cannabis brands, I think they so miss the point. And this is an example of what can happen there. It doesn't matter how popular Jay-Z might be. It doesn't matter how, flashy you make these promotions. If these joints, as people who describe them, these $50 joints, I've never tried them, but people said they failed to live up to expectations. Like they were mid-tier, and some people said they wouldn't even stay lit after you light them up. So my point is, cannabis is the kind of industry that is kind of celebrity-proof. If your products suck, people are not going to buy them. It really doesn't matter who's selling them. And so I think the tale of Monogram, Jay-Z's brand, and its impending bankruptcy here, I think that's a cautionary one for celebrities who think they're just going to get into cannabis and it's just going to be money bags. This is proof that that is not the case. And if you're getting in here, you better have a solid foundation of good products and people who know what they're doing. And finally, to end the Weekly Chronic, I reviewed Turtle Brownies by Love's Oven, which you know as Dracisco Farms, also Sweet Buzz. They do some great stuff. And I ended the issue with a new segment that I'm calling Lit Reads. I just wanted to share, I read a lot. That may be apparent to people listening to the show. I've been told I have kind of a nerdy or intelligent sound, and I guess that's just because I've read books mostly my whole life. I really enjoy reading to Violet now, and trying to instill a love of literature in her. But I thought that this would be a good opportunity for me to share a little bit, nothing too extensive. I'm not writing page after page of reviews here, but I do read books, and the ones that I think are worth your time, I want to share with you. So I've added the segment Lit Reads to my Weekly Chronic issues, and this week I finished up a book called The Constitution of Knowledge by Jonathan Rauch, and I thought it was really perfect for today's day and age. It's the subtitle is A Defense for Truth, and it has a lot to do with kind of the rapid spread of misinformation today, and it actually offers some ways to combat those, along with some rational sort of ways that you can look into weak arguments or how you might maybe cut some trolls off at the knees, whatever it is that you're looking to do, I thought this book was very, very timely, and that's why I included it in this week's Weekly Chronic. So as I said, the Weekly Chronic is free, and you can subscribe to it by clicking on the link below in the description notes. It'll take you to Substack, and that is where you can subscribe, and it'll get into your email inbox every Tuesday morning. Now let's jump into the News Joint Wrap, a wrap-up of news stories and events curated for you by IllinoisNewsJoint.com. My man Jason Brown put the site together. It is the joint you can hit for all your Illinois cannabis news and reviews. Some of those reviews lately include Purple Churro Live Resin Vape Cart by Cresco, Haze X White 91 Cake Icing by Dabstract, and the delectable Sweet Sparks by Sweet Buzz. You may have heard me review those as well. I have another Sweet Buzz product to tell you about a little later in this episode, but their signature Sweet Sparks are delightful. And a little bit of news which came out just yesterday on the 5th of this week. Illinois Supreme Court rules raw cannabis aroma alone is sufficient probable cause for a warrantless search of a vehicle, based on the stringent odor-proof container requirement in the vehicle code. This is something I brought up a few weeks ago when it went through an appellate court, who actually did rule that the odor was no longer enough to justify a search of the vehicle. The Supreme Court obviously went a different way, and it's unfortunate because with the Supreme Court ruling on it, that's the highest court in the state. So that means we are not going to see another appeal of this likely. And this was in the case People versus Molina, as to whether Illinois State Police Trooper Ryan Wagand had probable cause to search the vehicle that Molina was a passenger in after Wagand smelled the odor of raw cannabis coming from inside the vehicle. He conducted a search based solely on the odor and suspected there was cannabis in the vehicle that was not in an odor-proof container, which is a requirement of the Illinois Vehicle Code. Jason notes here, it says specifically prohibiting the possession of cannabis in a motor vehicle upon a highway unless it is stored in a, quote, sealed, odor-proof, child-resistant cannabis container, end quote. Wagand's search uncovered improperly stored cannabis, and Molina was charged with a violation. And it's unfortunate because you see a lot of states, Arizona did this recently as well, they're declaring that if it's legal to possess cannabis there and smoke it, consume it, and all of that, then why would it still be illegal to transport it in a vehicle? And that is the sticking point that the Supreme Court talked about. It is that notion of it being in an odor-proof, child-resistant cannabis container. So, thereby, if you are transporting cannabis, even in a legal state, that notion of the odor of the cannabis is still kind of a sticky area, and you can get searched still in the state of Illinois. But hopefully, one day that'll change as well. And one more piece of news that Jason Brown put on IllinoisNewsJoint.com this week. Illinois records best monthly medical cannabis sales since May, and that would be the November medical cannabis sales totals, which jumped up to $23.5 million. And Jason notes that bucks the trend from the last 3 years, in which monthly sales totals had dipped in November from October, before reaching the highest total of the year in December, which I think makes a lot of sense given the holidays and whatnot. But, as I talked about last week with this Green Wednesday before Thanksgiving, maybe the industry is trying its own way of encouraging that trend to reverse. But either way, you can find out more information about those reviews, the news stories, all of that and more is available for you all the time at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Some other news relating to Illinois, the Marijuana Herald published a list of Illinois' most popular cannabis strains as of this month in the state of Illinois. They point out that the recreational market continues to thrive, and they did a survey listing the most popular strains. And let me go through them for you right now. Number 1, Runts. That continues to dominate with its fruity sweetness and balanced effects. A lot of those strains are listed as hybrids. Also, Blue Dream, which is, as they say, a perennial favorite. Blue Dream was actually the first cannabis strain that I can remember asking for by name from my dealers back, again, almost 20 years ago. It was Blue Dream, Strawberry Cough for me, and then headband and green crack. Those were some that once I tried them, I was regularly going back asking if they had more of them. And then when they didn't have more, I would just have to take what they had, because that was what life was like before cannabis was legalized, and we don't want to go back there. Gelato is number 3 on the list, known for its creamy dessert-like flavor. Sour Diesel, listed at 4. Ice Cream Cake is number 5. And there are several others on this list, which I will leave for you to find for yourself. I've linked it below in the description notes. You can check that out. And some other news relating to Illinois. This one just came out today, just a couple of hours before I recorded this. Chicago Forensic Testing Lab is accused of providing flawed results in cannabis DUI convictions. This is from ABC7Chicago.com. I have listed this below in the description notes as well. I've linked it, so you can click on this too. But this one I definitely thought was worth your attention. Serious test questions about a Chicago lab could change the outcome of hundreds of impaired driving convictions in Illinois, and that could unlock the jail doors for some DUI convicts. After a months-long investigation, the ABC7I team discovered some test results from a prominent Chicago lab used by prosecutors have been deemed unreliable and could be inaccurate. The lab, University of Illinois Chicago Analytical Forensic Testing Laboratory, say that as fast as I just did, I dare you, is accused of providing flawed test results in cases of driving under the influence of marijuana, many of them resulting in motorists convicted and sent to jail. And there are allegations of a cover-up. Corey Lee of Sycamore, Illinois, was convicted back in 2022 of aggravated DUI and cannabis resulting in death. He crashed into another vehicle in 2018, killing 52-year-old Pedro Pasillas Sanchez and 22-year-old Pedro Delgado. Lee admits having used cannabis in the past, but insists he did not use it before getting behind the wheel that day. And he says, quoted here in the article, "I know that I was not under the influence that morning," end quote. In a bench trial in Boone County, Illinois, a judge ruled otherwise, relying on a blood test result showing Lee's level of Delta-9 THC, the main psychoactive component in marijuana, at 6.5 nanograms. In Illinois, that's beyond the limit and is an illegal amount for motorists. The criminal defense attorney, Don Ramsel, said it's malfeasance, misdirection, and incompetence, end quote. Ramsel's a suburban DUI defense attorney and is one of the lawyers representing Lee, who's now challenging his conviction, which is based on a test done by that forensic testing lab at the University of Illinois Chicago. A Boone County court filing claims the analysis of blood tests was somehow flawed, resulting in inaccurate THC numbers, and was unable to distinguish Delta-9 THC from other commonly encountered THC isomers like Delta-8. It also accuses the lab of covering up the flaws since 2021. For months, the I-team has been digging through records that raise concerns about the lab's analytical methods and how tests were conducted for substances that determine whether someone's driving under the influence of cannabis. The tests should have been able to distinguish between Delta-8 and Delta-9 THC. Again, Delta-9, as they note here, is the substance that actually should be measured to determine if someone's driving under the influence, according to Illinois law. That's the real key point. Jim O'Donnell is a forensic pharmacologist with Rush University Medical School. He's quoted in this article as saying, "This is what I would describe as a festering scandal," end quote. O'Donnell's expertise as a forensic pharmacologist is typically used by defense teams in criminal trials. The article goes on and gives a lot more detail. I have linked it below, but this is the real sticking point here. This is the key. This University of Illinois Chicago forensic testing lab that has resulted, as they say, in hundreds of cannabis DUI convictions. This is a huge potential cover-up. And as that Rush medical doctor said, the pharmacologist said, festering scandal. So I bring this up because if you or anyone you know has had a DUI cannabis conviction in the state of Illinois, this is something you might want to look into, because that could be overturned if they tested it, if there was a blood test done, a forensic test, at this lab. So again, I've linked that below. Check it out for yourself. And like I said, keep this in mind. I will definitely provide updates for you as they become available. But now let's jump into my favorite part of the show, which is my product reviews. And let me start with a lovely little pre-roll that I've been enjoying this week. This is one I hadn't tried before. Never tried the strain, never tried the pre-roll, but it's from High Supply, Cresco's, sort of budget brand of cannabis here. Always run some good deals at the Wrigleyville Sunnyside. And this strain is called Purple Plague. It's a sativa, which is my jam, listed at 26%, 26.93% THCA. Package date November 8th of 2024. Tested October 18th and harvested September 16th. So very fresh. I've been enjoying these the last week or two. I really, really liked this strain. As I said, sativa dominance are my thing. This is a cross of Animal Mints BX1 and Kush Mints strains. The high was one that crept up on me. It's not something that sort of like kicks you in the face as soon as you hit it in. It was a creeping high, great flavor. Even though it was Purple Plague, I was wondering if it was going to be fruity, but it was kind of a sugary sweet berry taste with notes of citrus and a little bit of spice as well. So very holiday friendly. The aroma, very similar. You can smell the sweetness, almost getting some grape or berry tones in it, along with a little bit of gassy diesel, mostly the sweet stuff. That's what I got. And then, as I said, about 15, 20 minutes later, you get a deep relaxation. You sink into your body, and you just fall onto that couch and you are happy to stay there. There are notes, as I read reviews of this, there are a lot of notes that it helps with chronic stress, chronic pain, ADD or ADHD, and depression or mood swings, along with, of course, nausea, headaches, or migraines. It did kick a headache for me earlier this week, which I always appreciate from cannabis. And this is one that I'll definitely be going back for. I really liked the Purple Plague, and I love the sativa vibe that it got. Soothing, not too jittery like I talked about. Some sativas can be like that, like you're over-caffeinated. This is not one of those. Very soothing, very fun, very relaxing, and I'll definitely be going back. But here's another little tip. These, if you haven't tried these High Supply pre-rolls in their little cylindrical tubes, these pre-rolls are open-faced. What I mean by that is they do not twist or cap the ends of the joints. They are just open. And so, what I noticed after smoking the last one is there was a little pile of ground up weed at the bottom of this container. So I thought I was done with this Purple Plague in the pre-rolls, and I was, but I was able to smoke an entirely full bowl based on the remnants, what was left over in this container. So these High Supplies, really, really good. Good for the pre-rolls, nice and convenient that way. And then, likely because of the open faces of the joints, you're going to be left with a little bonus at the end, too, to smoke from your bowl or your bong or whatever you pack, whatever piece you're vibing with right now. Make sure not to throw out that High Supply container and dump it out onto a surface before you dispose of it. Because like I said, you're going to find some stuff in there that is worth hanging on to. And one other product I've got to tell you about this week. This is from my friends at Sweet Buzz. They always do such wonderful, delectable edibles, and I've told you about their peanut butter cups. I've told you about their Best in Grass Silver Award-winning multi-pack, the Sweet Somethings, with a lot of their different cups in them. They've also got the Love's Oven baked goods, a lot of great stuff, and of course the Sweet Sparks, which are their signature item. But they also make one of these fabulous, fascinating sweet powders. If you haven't tried a powder of THC, an infusing powder where you can either mix it into a drink, you can put it on your food like a seasoning, you can take this powder, you crack the pack open, and you can put it on anything. You can put it on your dinner. Sprinkle it over some salmon. You can put it in coffee, which is what I did for most of this pack. Really, really enjoyed that because it was a great way of starting the day. I always talk about loving to combine my caffeine and cannabis. This allowed me to do that without having to smoke anything. I just dumped the pack right into my cup of coffee, And it was fantastic. I love the vibe I got 20 minutes later. I got the nice kick of the caffeine, rounded off nicely by the THC. And this sweet and powder from Sweet Buzz was just fabulous. But let me tell you the best way that I used it, because this was just a couple nights ago. It was the night before Gretchen's birthday. It was the 4th, so Wednesday of this week. We made some popcorn. And Elisa Brill of Sweet Buzz recommended to me, try it on some popcorn. So I did that. And let me tell you, that's a freaking 10 out of 10. That's a grand slam right there. For those who don't know baseball, that's knocking it out of the park with the bases loaded. That is a full-on success of putting the sweet and powder on popcorn, because the popcorn was buttered. You get that sort of savory, salty, buttery taste of the popcorn, but then there is it's not overpowering. It's not like you're now eating, caramel corn or something like that. Now it is just this subtle sweetness that caps off the savory, and it was a delectable combination. And then, you just sit back watching whatever we were watching, probably some Star Trek. I think we're on Enterprise right now. Then 15 minutes later, we're both just kind of sinking into the bed and feeling pleasantly stoned and just there for a nice couple of hours of chilling before falling off to sleep. And I thought, this is the beauty of what a product like Sweet and Powder can do for you. You don't have to step outside in this cold winter weather. You don't have to smoke anything. You mix it in with your coffee and start your day with it, or you powder your popcorn with it and you end your day with it. Either way, you're winning. And you are getting a delightful buzz, like a lot of the Sweet Buzz products give you, but there's not the calories that you would get from one of these, peanut butter cups or their sweet somethings or anything. You don't have to worry about, as great as the Sweet Sparks are, you don't have to worry about popping 5 or 6 of those. Hey, maybe what I'll do next time is mix in the Sweet Sparks with the empowdered popcorn, because that mix of, a sweet something, a sweet like an M&M, like a piece of candy or chocolate chips with the popcorn, that's a great sweet savory mix. But just putting the sweet and powder on the popcorn, that's a 10 out of 10 from me, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So go to GetSweetBuzz.com and get yourself some of that sweet and powder for this holiday season. You're not going to regret that. Listener, my guest today has some very fascinating products that I am excited to tell you about. As I talk a lot on the show about one of my favorite things about this new landscape of legal cannabis that is state by state, even though it's the patchwork of laws that we have, it's still an exciting time because in the states and countries where it's legalized, there's a lot of new exciting products coming out, whether those be, along the lines of flower or beverages or edibles, the consumables that we take to feel a certain way. There are also a very exciting field of topicals that have been coming out as well. And some of those can help with things like body pain or soreness from working out or any kind of chronic issues you might have on joints. I've talked with many people on and off the show about the benefits that cannabis offers them in terms of quality of life improvements. And a lot of those, aside from things like, dealing with anxiety or maybe some sleep issues like I have, there's the issue of body pain or discomfort comes up a lot. And so it's so exciting to me to see a lot of these products coming out utilizing cannabis and different cannabinoids to address the consistent and chronic body pain that some people are dealing with. And there's a company that offers some very interesting creams as well as some other products that deal with not just these body pains, but kind of use cannabinoids to put you in different sort of states. And here to talk about some of those products from Galyna today is the CEO and co-founder of Galyna, Toby Ripsum. Welcome, Toby. Thanks for coming on today.
Hi, Don. A pleasure's all mine.
Yeah, appreciate you taking the time. And so let's just start a little bit with you. I know that you have been in cannabis for a while, since before Galyna was founded here. Tell us about your journey into, learning about the plant and such.
Absolutely. I moved to Denver in 2012, almost a year before we all voted to legalize this amazing plant. I came to town to start my own real estate development and capital company. And while that sputtered a little bit, I found an opportunity in that same real estate aspect with cannabis cultivation. my love for that deal side and the capital and putting a business together was never more prevalent than in this amazing evolution of a whole industry. So I teamed up with some growers, brought the kind of corporate chops and operational, managerial, and marketing know-how that the growers didn't necessarily have. We ended up teaming up into quite a nice partnership, which ended up becoming one of the largest cannabis companies in Colorado history. It's called Veritas Fine Cannabis. And all along the way, I'm not a huge smoker personally, not a vapor. It just doesn't work with my body that well.
Sure.
End up raiding my kitchen and get uncomfortable, and I'm as far as founder market fit goes, it's not a one-to-one with me on there.
Sure.
But I knew and saw on a daily basis how just fantastic this plant was, and how it was changing lives. And I knew there was a more palatable way to get this to the broader consumer market than raw flower, which is what we were growing in our gardens and putting out this really top quality product throughout the state, and everybody clamoring for it. But knew there was something else in there. Started to see in kind of generation one of cannabis back in 2014 when we finally came to shelves for adult use in Colorado. Started to see kind of gen one topicals, skincare, and knew there was a lot going on the pain side, but also thought, I get this, and I appreciate what's happening here. I've never had amazing skin. I've been an athlete most of my life. I was a cross-country ski racer. I've had plenty of body woes and injuries and that sort of thing. And also living at high altitude in the tundra of Sun Valley, Idaho, Denver, Colorado, the Front Range Mountains here. My skin gets really beat up, really dried out, really windburn, sunburn, you name it, in addition to the athletic maladies. And just started to think, there's something here. There's a curative property in this that I might not be able to do it personally, but I can put together a team that can. And so even back then in the first few years, started to watch skincare topical business evolve in cannabis and started to put together a team of, I partnered with a 45-year formulator from Shiseido and L'Oreal, Procter & Gamble, and then eventually brought on a chief scientific officer with experience with the Department of Defense, National Institute of Health. She's done a bunch of patents for companies like 3M. So very much in that corporate proving out efficacy in developmental drug world. She has a couple of doctorates as well. We put together kind of this super group of executives to tackle this issue. We've been able to then harness the cannabis industry, traditional skincare formulation, and then finally the scientific piece, which leads us into patent development and patent creation of some science that is still a bit of a, no pun intended, a walled garden from major universities, major institutions. What they may be doing is kind of a secret. What we're doing is not, and we're able to take these patent work and bring it to the public through the Galyna brand, but also we know we're pioneering a space for this plant that will be adopted by Fortune 100 companies when those walls lift.
Wow, that's very cool. A lot of cool stuff in there, Toby, and I appreciate you sharing your story like that. And obviously, it does give you a unique vantage point to have seen this really start up in the U.S. anyway, this market going from, as I always talk about on the show, the dark underbelly of the prohibited black market, kind of everything that was forced in terms of economics relating to cannabis, to go from that to the legal side of it, and then all of the bumps along the way, the growing pains of a new industry. I say on the show a lot, we've never had anything like this aside from the prohibition of alcohol back in the 1920s to make that illegal and then reverse that trend, go legal here. And you got to see that firsthand up close in Colorado, and that learning what you did through that company of, as you mentioned, Veritas Fine Cannabis, which I think is a really cool name, that obviously informed your journey with Galyna and what you're working on now. And I can also, I think that, today we know a lot more about taking care of our skin than I think we used to, a few years or decades ago, certainly. Not just, protecting from the sun. Sunscreen's really important, but, the things you mentioned, just the windburn that you can get, exposure to the elements, people who are maybe on the water more, especially salt water, if you're getting that kind of air at a regular interval, these things can all take a toll on your skin over the time periods. And so I think that the topicals you're talking about and harnessing the power of the cannabis plant to deal with some things that, as I mentioned, it's not necessarily the smoking to get high, or it's not the party vibe of like a beverage or an edible, but it's a more almost, medicinal or at least therapeutic approach to using the cannabis plant. And I do think that with this, legal landscape changing, there's plenty of room for everybody, even if you're not like, an old school user or somebody that was always just a big fan of smoking at parties or someone that smokes every day. I talk with all types on this show, and I think that one of the great things about cannabis right now is how exciting it is, and then how that excitement and that vibe is really opening up the party and welcoming to all types. And so I just think you don't need to be someone who's been a user of a long time to necessarily find value in this space or bring value to the space as you're doing with Galyna. And so you mentioned kind of the patents you guys are working with and your different products. So I want to talk about some of those. What was the first product that you offered under the Galyna brand?
We came out with the first 3 kind of foundational formulations. We do have quite the bullpen or pipeline of product development ahead of us, but we wanted to come out with 3 core philosophy foundations that we can build and iterate from. First, as you had mentioned in your intro, we came out with a pain cream. That's very much a Gen 1 cannabis easy layup. There's a built-in customer base for a cannabinoid-driven pain cream. Ours is called Soothe. It is fantastic. It is available in THC, CBD 1-to-1 formulations in Colorado and soon to be New Jersey, but also more importantly at galyna.co, no M on the end, direct-to-consumer online as a CBD isolate formulation.
Wow.
Then next we came, and that's actually, while it is our number 1 seller, it's our least scientifically impressive because it's fine. It's a wonderful pain cream. We'd love to put it up against anyone else's and watch it outperform, and I'll get into the molecular reasons why with our final patent.
Sure.
But the other 2 formulations are game changers in the sense that they're just novel technology that the world hasn't seen yet. Our next one up we'd call Dream. It's our deep hydrating night moisturizer. It is, while it's a heavy cream, it is also anti-acne and anti-aging.
Wow.
It boosts collagen production. As we get older, our human skin starts producing less and less collagen, giving it less and less resistance and bounce. So we're able to actually stimulate collagen receptors, or collagen generating receptors, and mostly around the eyes is where we see the most usage. But in addition, the cannabinoids use an antimicrobial property to kill acne bacteria to the same levels as something traditional you'd see on the shelves of a pharmacy or department store. However, as a moisturizer, we are not deleterious to the skin, much like a salicylic acid, a benzoyl peroxide, alcohols, acids across the board,
Sure.
where they dry out your skin overall.
Right.
The common thread in the cannabinoid usage we have in these 3 formulations is we really work through positive healing. And that's kind of one of the ethoses of cannabis in general.
Yeah.
It's more of a nutraceutical than a poison like other vices and what have you.
Right.
So Dream is our kind of beauty-ish product. Finally, we have my favorite is called Repair. It's a wound healing balm. This is truly I'm going to say space age product that the world has just never knew it needed, and now the second people have that moment of need and usage, and 24 hours later, we have a customer for life. This is a lanolin-derived CBD hemp cannabinoid.
Sure.
It is a cell regenerating machine increases cell metabolisms on the skin at about 150%. So it really kicks up that regrowth while killing off all the bacteria from the cannabinoid properties. When you had mentioned lipids earlier, and we do, my co-founder is a specialist in deep hydration of skin. And so that typically follows lipids. The lipids that team up with the cannabinoids in our products is in Repair. It is the lanolin, which is the cholesterol from the sheep's wool. That lanolin is our only non-vegan ingredient across the board in the entire company. So 2 of the other products are 100% vegan.
Oh, cool.
Repair is 100% natural.
That's so fascinating, and I'm glad you spelled those out, because I'm looking at the website now, listener. If you want to go to it, I know Toby mentioned it, Galyna, GALYNA.co, and it's really cool. You mentioned you're there in Colorado, soon New Jersey, but you're saying that anybody can head to the website and order these, and you guys ship it to them wherever they are?
Absolutely. In the United States, we're not shipping to Canada or Europe just yet.
Gotcha.
We do have some capabilities where that comes with the fun legal hurdles we're all navigating in this space.
Yeah, totally. And hopefully, again, as I talk a lot on the show about this rescheduling timeline, even though now this administrative hearing, December 2nd, we're hopefully looking at a 2025 official rescheduling, and that's going to open up a lot of these doors for regulations just like this. But in the meantime, as you heard there, listener, if you're in any of the 50 United States, or I'm assuming the District of Columbia, you can you just head to the website and order these for yourself. But let's get into that Repair, because I'm looking at this on the website now, and you were just talking about that healing, those properties there, what it does for skin rejuvenation. And it's advertised here as healing toward burns, cuts, scrapes, then things like eczema and psoriasis, along with scar tissue and stretch marks. And, you kind of said it there. It's a sort of space age product. And I'm just imagining taking that healing ability, or the repair of the skin cells, up 150%. This must be kind of amazing for people to watch over a time period as things like scars or burns or cuts or scrapes just kind of knit themselves back in what I'm imagining is a shorter timeline than any other products they're probably used to, yeah?
You are completely correct. And one of the most fun things we've seen, we love the feedback from the customers as to how they're using this. It's not a sexy industry in regards to, hey, look at this wound on my foot or whatnot. You're not getting that viral uptick.
Yeah.
However, you are on the tattoo front, and we're seeing a lot of work. We're seeing a lot of constant healing happening. You want to keep that tattoo covered and moist while healing, but keep all the antimicrobial properties going as well. I think I read about 2% of all tattoos get infections from innumerable maladies and reasons.
Right.
But Repair is there for you in that regard as well. What makes the 3 formulations so unique is what we call the Galyna molecule, and that's what separates them from traditional legacy CBD formulations. We are actually able to take that cannabinoid and bring along 2 other entourage ingredients that both protect the cannabinoid, encapsulating it and keeping it from oxidization, and then also and that's through a squalane, which is fermented olives. Sometimes it's fermented sugarcane.
Sweet.
It's traditionally from shark liver oil, but we do everything vegan, and so we found an alternative resource for that. In addition, we use meadowfoam seed oil, which helps dispersion across the skin and absorption into the skin. So that triumvirate of the cannabinoids, the meadowfoam seed oil, and the squalane create the Galyna molecule, which is what really enables the cannabinoid to both blossom, absorb into the skin, feed off the lipid of the squalene, and protect it from oxidization.
Wow, this is so cool to hear about, Toby, because honestly, even that sounds so innovative to me. I've talked with people on the show a lot about, and even from the very beginning, I've been in, as a personal cannabis user for going on 20 years now, and I've been in this sort of, covering it space for the last 3 years or so, and the concept of the entourage effect is a well-known one. Even before it became legal, the notion of the hundreds of cannabinoids that are in the plant that work together. And for so long, people had no way of isolating the desired effects because they just didn't understand how the cannabinoids worked among one another. You try and get some product that isolates the munchies effect, but you couldn't get that without also being sleepy or whatever, just as an example. But I think it's so cool what you just described you guys are doing doing is this: you're not, instead of taking just one cannabinoid, which I think a lot of other product makers have done thus far, you're kind of breaking off 3 of them and making from the entourage at large, the group of hundreds in the plant, you're taking off a subgroup, a little sub-collective, and then you're creating a miniature entourage effect so that instead of hundreds working together, your one is the real fixation and you've got 2 others to make for this triumvirate that are working together that isolate and recreate the effect that you're trying to elicit with these products. And I think that approach is just so innovative, taking kind of a group from the larger collective and then instead of failing with just, isolating the one, you are succeeding by taking multiples off, and then that's where you get, the effectiveness of these products you guys have.
Completely correct. We love learning about new cannabinoids, discovering, it's typically anecdotal through other scientists and other work as to what people think is happening and what have you, and we're able to then formulate these patents to encompass all cannabinoids across the board. Then we're able to slip in whichever ones suit the proper science for what we claim the product does. The way we operate is we see what the science happens with the science, and then we build a product around the truth of the science.
Cool.
So instead of trying to fit something into a box that works well for a market fit, we make the product first, and then we find the market for it. But as you said, there are so many cannabinoids out there, and there are more being discovered. It's a lot like constellations or the night sky. There's always a new star out there, and while we are in the early innings of this game, I think that probably the national anthem's just been sung, and it might be the first inning. But there are more and more cannabinoids, and they're able to. Some are not economically feasible to incorporate into products like this and still present the consumer with an acceptable MSRP. However, that's changing more and more through both traditional cultivation, synthetic cultivation, not necessarily synthetic marijuana, but you're able to have synthetic cannabinoid created through fermentation and things like that. From hemp.
Right, exactly. And just to dovetail onto that, I do think that, as you're talking about like the marketability, the value or the ability of some companies to kind of get in on this as the rescheduling moves forward, again, hopefully next year, I think that's going to open up a lot of lanes for even more people to kind of enter it in, and for more ways for people to get in on this as well for cheaper. I bring up the notion of interstate commerce a lot, which looks like it's a possibility once it does get down to Schedule 3. And so there you're going to have, instead of what it's been so far, like here in Illinois, anytime there's, any product that what they want to sell on store shelves here has to be made, processed, and stored within the state lines of Illinois. When it becomes rescheduled, that's not going to have to be the case. So you can then outsource, if an Illinois dispensary wants to have a product on their shelves, they would be able to outsource, whether it's the flower or a more, sort of laboratory generated product, like what you guys are doing. They would be able to get the good stuff from another state and then bring it here and then sell it however they wanted to. And I think that's going to kind of open up the lanes a little bit and make it more feasible for people to do kind of things, which I'm looking forward to. But to keep with the baseball metaphor, I think you guys, even if it is early and the national anthem is just sung, it seems like you guys have already hit one out of the park here with your healing balm, the repair, as well as the Soothe pain relief cream. And you were talking about the Dream product earlier, the night rejuvenating cream here, and you had mentioned that it eliminates acne bacteria, it boosts collagen, overnight hydration, and it's got anti-aging properties. Can you talk a little about this Dream cream and kind of the impetus for this product as well, and how people are, I'm sure, excited about it?
It's amazing in the regards that it suits everyone's face. And you can use it beyond your face. We've actually, as I said earlier, love the customer feedback of how people are finding different ways to utilize our formulations. Repair is typically the one where people get a little out there of, you don't even want to get into all the stories I've heard of
I'm sure.
how it's cured God knows what. I've used it on my dog. My dog is actually included in the patents from getting a nick on the top for a dome at daycare. But Dream is even fantastic post-shave. So you put it on your face in the morning after a nice tight shave. And it's that collagen boosting helps any sort of effect on the face as well. In addition, we are utilizing Dream at a lot of esthetician shops and spas for after any kind of treatment to be done on the face or body. Anytime you've either bladed, scraped, gone after the skin, if it's not a situation for repair where you need a heavier balm where it's clearly open skin, the Dream collagen boost and paired with that deep hydrating moisturizer is just fantastic on the skin, even for something as light as we've been having some success lately in the Southwest U.S. at pool clubs for one of the pro tips on Dream is keep it in the fridge. They give out little packets of Dream after sun in the pool at the pool clubs in Scottsdale and Las Vegas. We're testing it out. It's a very great post-sun, maybe pre-sunburn, but keep something on the right side of brown, not red.
Nice. Oh, that's really cool. And I love that notion of the aftershave thing too, because man, I got to tell you, I just, for a long time, I kind of kept a beard going, but I had my wife and I welcomed a daughter back in April. And so with the newborn, I just wanted to shave. And so I haven't been going clean shaven for years. And now the last several months I have been, and the cuts and like the irritation that I'm dealing with now after years of never having to do this, I'm being reminded of, that being one of the reasons why I just kind of like let the beard go for so long. But knowing that Dream has some, helpful sort of properties as an aftershave, I am going to give that a try, and I really look forward to seeing how that goes, because I can definitely use some help in that area.
I'm right there with you, Don. I welcomed a son in February and have a 3-year-old also. My 3-year-old is now getting so vocal as I've gone from a beard to a little stubble, and I give him a kiss goodnight, and he says, "Dad, no whiskers tomorrow, no whiskers." and the Dream gets not only after I take the whiskers off, gets the red bumps away too.
Oh man, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And by the way, congratulations then on the new addition to your family as well. It is a very exciting time. Violet, my daughter, she's our first, and it's just these last 5 months they've already flown by, but it's so special, and I can't wait for the vocalization that you were just talking about there.
Congratulations. I look forward to my boys not understanding that what I've done was in the past decade of cannabis legalization was ever even on the fringe or thought twice about. I look forward to them knowing a world where cannabis is just as on the shelf as soda or fruit or whatnot.
Yes.
And welcome to the world just the same as we're just farmers.
Dude, absolutely. I feel 100% you took the words right from me. I'm so looking forward to that exact same thing. That's truly the way that stigma like this dies out. It's often not that people have a transformative, mind shifting or position shifting stance or event happen. It's mainly that the old propaganda that's baked into to those generations, it ends up, dying off, and kids grow up in a world where it's been normalized. That does more to kind of normalize it and make it just like any other thing, like you said, soda or any of the other products we buy on shelves. And I'm really looking forward to that as well. One last thing, I want to get into the Soothe pain relief cream as well, because we talked about the repair for healing and we talked about the Dream, and they obviously, all of these, it seems like they have some really great properties that I think most people would be interested in for one reason or another. But even this baseline of the pain relief, it's advertised on the website here, dealing with aches, arthritis and pain, menstrual cramping, migraines and sore muscles. You mentioned obviously anything athletic, if you're recovering from a workout or, maybe some kind of, injuries from playing something or doing some activities. Talk a little about Soothe and kind of maybe the response to that, because I have to imagine that's got to be really popular as well.
Soothe is our number one seller. It just outperforms every other CBD and THC pain cream. It lasts about 8 hours. It has been on the CBD only front extremely popular with 5-star hotels, spas, and other athletic consumer-based focused first adopter markets. People are using this for spot treatment on massages, and I'm not sure when when this interview is going to air, but I'll give you a little secret here. We're working on a Soothe massage oil.
Ooh.
That will be this is a pretty high dollar cream in either a 1.7 ounce or a 0.4 ounce fill. We're looking for, they're able to hit your hot spots on a massage or utilize it, as you said, for menstrual cramps on the right spot, the base of your neck or on your temples for a headache or a hangover. There's plenty of uses for Soothe, but spread this Galyna molecule spread with some of the other Soothe ingredients into a massage oil will give that more holistic whole body approach. But it's also a way to purchase it on the website and get that 5-star massage at home, much like you'd get at who's one of our customers here, the Viceroy in Snowmass, Colorado.
Sure. You
can have that same luxury massage at home, whether it's with your friend, your spouse's hands, your Theragun, what have you. You can still get that same healing.
Wow. No,
that deep tissue. One warning I will give you with Soothe is do not use it on broken skin.
Do not
for repair and drain.
Got it. So no Soothe on the broken skin. Gotcha. Okay, that's good to know. But
Soothe presents a crescendo of healing effects that starts with a gentle heat, and that comes from capsaicin, which is gleaned from hot peppers.
Gotcha. So yes, that makes sense. You wouldn't want to drop a little bit of that into any broken skin. I'm sure that's not going to make you feel soothed in the way that you were expecting there. But very cool to know about the massage oil. I think that obviously just thinking of the uses of that and taking the properties you were just talking about with Soothe, I can see that obviously, I'm sure people are very excited to hear that as well. And I am looking forward to honestly trying all of these Toby, at different times, just to kind of, see their different effects. And as you were laying out with these just 3 products you have right now on the site, as well as that massage oil coming out, and the future, the philosophy that you have clearly coming from a product development standpoint, I think, as someone who's just interviewed a lot of people on the show, and, entrepreneurs have their different reasons for doing stuff, I will say it seems to me like you guys have the right idea in terms of your approach, and I really look forward to, what you guys come out with in the future as well, because when you were talking about looking at the science and just seeing kind of where the products can fall in line, I was imagining kind of that like CRISPR Cas9, the genetic, editing tool, where you guys are like looking at the cannabinoids that are there in the whole entourage of cannabis, seeing what science is coming out with it, and then you're using kind of a CRISPR approach where you're, efficiently snipping out the genes, or in this case, the cannabinoids that are you're trying to, affect or elicit any responses with, and then put those formulaically into a product. And it sounds like that's already gone really well for you guys, and I look forward to seeing more of it.
It's ironic you mentioned that. We were working with a group a handful of years back that was using somewhat of a CRISPR style tool for cultivation genetics, and we showed them what we were doing and how our chief scientific officer tests our formulation on post-elective plastic surgery, human skin, ex vivo under microscopes, and the guys doing the genetic modifying or editing, what have you, they would say it's not modifying.
Right.
They said, we don't have any science like what you're doing.
Wow.
We're very excited going forward. And, the skin's the largest human organ. There's so many different ways to live a cleaner, better, happier life through skin. It's also, it's the front door, your front door to the world. And we look forward to making it better and better for all of our users, both now and going forward. This is truly a product that could be in a dispensary. It could be in a hospital burn unit. It could be in a beauty salon. No problem, and everywhere in between.
I love it. I love it. And I'm sure I'm not the only one excited to give these a try. Just one more time, listener, you can head to galyna.co. And if you're in the U.S., any of the 50 states listening to this, you can order any of these of their creams. The Repair, the Soothe, and the Dream creams, all available now at that website. And if you're suffering from any of the issues that we were just talking about in this interview, it sounds to me like this is a great place to start, and it seems like you can find exactly what you're looking for. And report back what you're feeling, because I'm looking forward to trying these as well. Toby Ripsum, CEO and co-founder of Galyna, thank you so much for stopping by and talking a little bit about your products and your approach to cannabis today.
I appreciate the time, Don. Have a good one.
And there you have it, listener. I want to thank one more time my guest, Toby Ripsum, CEO of Galyna. What a wonderful conversation that was. That guy's got great perspective, and I love the philosophy that he takes into the product design here. And I wanted to follow this up because I have gotten a chance now to try some of these Galyna products, some of the creams that we were talking about. And I want to tell you specifically about the pain relief cream. Now, I'm somebody that's into skincare. My family has had some cancer histories in the past. We all have some, marks on our skin. And so one of my best friends in the world passed away 10 years ago from skin cancer. And so I've always been very, very diligent about, especially since that happened, putting on sunscreen and moisturizing and just taking care of our largest organ, which is the skin. But I never really tried anything that was mixed with cannabis. I've been very intrigued by these THC creams and everything, but this Galyna product was the first one that I had a chance to try like this. And I got to tell you, I was blown away. I didn't really have many expectations, but I was curious based on what Toby was telling me. And so I tried right away the pain relief cream because I also have some pain in my joints like a lot of us do. I'm getting toward 40 here. I have some old injuries from playing sports, from lifting weights over the years. I also did a really stupid thing when I was in my early 20s and was doing what they call cliff scrabbling in a campsite in Wisconsin. I climbed up about 100 feet with a buddy of mine, and as we were climbing back down, I fell about 50 feet, and that was really bad. I fractured both my wrists, and I had some, stitches in my hand, staples in my skull, and all of that. Point being, I have some pain from these old injuries, these things that were left over specifically in my joints. And so I decided to try this pain relief cream on my wrists, on my knees, elbows, and shoulders. And I got to tell you, I fell in love with this stuff. I was using it every day. Not an exaggeration. The smell is very pleasant. It's almost fruity. Sort of sweet. It's got a hint of like Vicks VapoRub. It's not mentholated, but you can sort of get this coolness, this refreshing scent when you open the cap. And then when you spread it on, you feel that coolness. You feel that refreshing vibe on your joints, and the pain slowly starts to melt away. And it's obviously not permanent. None of these things are like magical cures for this stuff, but it does what it says it would do, which is that it provides some temporary relief from those painful symptoms that you might get from an old injury or just chronic pain from whatever you've been dealing with. I haven't had a chance to try it on my lower back yet or like my ankles, but I'm going to try that too. But I'll tell you, after I lift, which I do most mornings, I tend to have some aches in my wrists. I try and avoid workouts that are overly strenuous on the wrists, but it really doesn't matter. You're moving around. And I also from, back years ago when I was running more, my left knee kind of has a little bit of that runner's knee where like there's a little bit of jutting out of the bone on the top of my shin. Sorry to be too descriptive here. I hope that didn't put you off anything, but it's painful. That's just something to tell you. When I wake up in the morning and stuff, and after I do a workout, my wrists and my left knee specifically are painful. And so when I put this pain relief cream from Galyna on them, it just takes like a little fingerful, like just you swab one finger on it and then you just rub it on whatever joint or area you're looking to get relief on. And it really helps. You're walking around after you put it on, you just get this kind of pleasant coolness. You're very aware of that it's having that effect on the area that you've put it on. But then, like I said, the pain is just not there. And it is really, really pleasant when you're used to feeling pain on any step, like if it's your ankle or knee, like it is for me, or if you're just picking something up, and it doesn't have to be very heavy, but if you have an old injury, like I do on my wrists, these little everyday things can become unpleasant. And so something like this pain relief cream from Galyna, this is just a wonderful solution to those problems. The cream's not oily. It doesn't really leave unpleasantness on the skin. Sometimes when I use lotions or I put these things on, I'm left with like an unpleasant sensation. That was not the case here. It's not too sticky. It's not too oily. It's a lot like some other lotions. It's a little bit stiffer than that, I suppose. But this is something I'm going to be keeping as a part of my regular regimen here. And I encourage you to give it a try for yourself. So head to that website that Toby mentioned for Galyna's products, and I really can't recommend this highly enough. You owe it to yourself to give it a shot. And one final news story that I thought was worth bringing to your attention, listener. Medical Marijuana Association sues New York, the state, over a $20 million licensing fee. The lawsuit calls the fee arbitrary, exorbitant, irrational, and punitive. All great adjectives. I'm on board with all four of those. A medical marijuana trade group sued New York's Cannabis Control Board, the CCB, this week, December 4th, claiming that a $20 million licensing fee imposed by regulators on weed retailers violates the state constitution and the 2021 Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, MRTA. According to the lawsuit, the fee represents an unconstitutional tax that, quote, offends the Equal Protection Doctrine and breaks the separation of powers and takings clauses. The plaintiffs, the New York Medical Cannabis Industry Association, NYMCIA, said that the CCB overstepped its authority and unfairly penalized medical marijuana businesses, jeopardizing their survival to favor newer recreational companies. See, this is getting in the middle of a debate that a lot of states have. We talk about it here in Illinois. Jason Brown and I have talked about this at length. The notion of medical patients being pushed to the side in favor of the recreational customer. And I understand why businesses and even these governing bodies like these in New York, why they might be fixated on the recreational customers. It's pretty simple, because there are a lot more of those than there are of medical patients in the state. That's just going to be how it always is. You've got people driving in from out of states. You've got cannabis tourists coming into legal states. Here in Illinois, you got people driving from over the border in Wisconsin and Indiana. They're not medical patients in the state. They're going to be buying under the recreational umbrella. And there's a lot of people who live in this state that aren't going to get their med cards. They're buying under the recreational umbrella. So I understand why businesses and why this sort of thing happens. But cannabis, even though the line between medical and recreational use is sometimes blurry, I acknowledge that. I might be somebody who uses it medically to get to sleep at night, but I also use it socially. I'll also put it in my coffee. Like I said, I'll go to a party and burn a joint with somebody. There is a blurred line situation here between medical usage and just recreational usage of it. So I get it's confusing. But the fact is, the foundation of this, of legalizing cannabis, this came forth because of the medical patient. States started legalizing medically long before they did so recreationally. And you cannot forget and you cannot sweep aside the medical patient in these states, in this equation. The med patients need to be remembered, need to be put front and center. Then you can give business to the recreational customer. Anyway, though, this article does go on, and you can read the full text of the lawsuit along with a lot more information. This is from news10.com, and I have linked it below. By all means, check it out for yourself. But that's kind of why I shared it with you. It's because it's another example, and a huge one, in the state of New York, of this kind of tug of war, especially where, government's concerned, between recreational and medical cannabis consumers. So that is the news that I have for you. And now, for those of you who've been listening the last few weeks, you'll know what time it is. Right now, it is time for the haiku. And this week, I think we might need this more than ever. So let's take a deep breath and light it up. Hooey! That's the stuff right there. Okay. Yeah. Numbers twist and sway. Truth buried in cloudy smoke. Tests fail us again. And that was this week's haiku, which I thought you'd enjoy. It sort of ties into the theme of that University of Illinois Chicago testing center, which obviously has failed big time if this scandal turns out to be true that was exposed by the ABC 7i team there. If they have engaged in a cover-up and, led to the imprisonment of over 100 people for DUI cannabis convictions, and this lab, was the one who was, providing faulty readings, that is quite a scandal. I mean, how do you even handle that? I look forward to seeing what Chicago and the state of Illinois do to handle this, and I will certainly be bringing that to you on a future episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. That's all I've got for you this week. A little bit of a programming note here. I want to tell you next week, the episode that comes out, it'll be out on the 13th. That's going to be the last episode of this podcast for the year of 2024. I'm taking a little bit of a holiday break, kind of just, it's been a workload, I will say. This year has been a lot going on, and obviously, my wife Gretchen and I, we have a lot going on with Violet around this holiday time, and we've got packed weekends, and it's just been hard to continue doing this. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and we'll be back in January with new episodes of Cannabis Man. In the meantime, I will be putting out new issues of the Weekly Chronic. You can subscribe to that for free below in the description notes. You can also send me a text at that link that I talked about in the description notes as well. And of course, you can follow the show on social media, C-Man Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, and it's the Cannabis Man Podcast Facebook page and YouTube channel. Subscribe, leave a rating or a review wherever it is you listen to this show, and be sure to tell people about it who you think might be interested in the topics that I'm covering here. I do want to spread this information as far as it can go, because I think more people who know about what cannabis can offer, that's how we can move normalization forward. That's how people can find quality of life improvements that maybe they've been seeking for a long time. That's maybe a way that we can all live together in harmony a little more peacefully in this sort of existence on this shared stage that we all call Earth. So that's what I've got for you this week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being a part of this journey this year. I don't know what country or state you're listening from, but I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate you being here with me. I appreciate you listening to the show and engaging with it. And I'd love to share a joint with you sometime. Either way, whatever you're doing, however you're doing it, be sure to spend some time with your loved ones this holiday season, and always, because that time is limited, even though it seems sometimes like it's not, even though it feels sometimes like those limits are not stringent enough. It is limited, and when that option gets taken off the table, if you didn't spend as much time as you could with that person, it's going to haunt you. So it's just something that I try and recommend to people. Even though you might be upset, even though you might have a disagreement about, who knows, the election, some sports teams that you don't support the same way. If you love these people, these meaningful connections are sort of, I think of, if there's any reason or purpose for us being here, it's that. It's to connect with people, it's to form those deep connections, and it's to spend meaningful time with those people that you love. So do that. And if you can, enjoy some cannabis with them. And I'll be back next week, and then again next year on the Cannabis Man podcast. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is 100% originally crafted by myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music written and composed by Yusu Kim, aka Good Son.